Hello everyone, welcome to our YWCA Stand Against Racism webinar series. Today is a special day because we are celebrating 100 years of the 19th Amendment of the United States Constitution, where women are allowed to vote, thanks to the women who throughout their history have advocated for women's rights in the United States. Among those women is the United States, YWCA. We want to mention a few things before we begin. This virtual event is through Zoom, hence we could have connection problems and even occasionally lose the audio. If one of the people here loses the connection, it will try to connect again. And the same with the audio. Last week it happened and we lost all of our audio and even our connection fell completely a couple of times. Zoom has had problems and they're trying to fix them. In the meantime, please be patient with the technology and with us. We want to remind you that this discussion will be informative and as always to be polite and respectful of others and their opinions. Please use the button for the question and answer, not the comment section. So today we will have a special guest. Her name is Jenny Isaacs. She is the Executive Director of the Doylestown Immigrant Rights Action Group, or Grupo de Accion in Doylestown. Welcome, Jenny, to our YWCA webinars.
Thank you very much for having me today, Carolyn, and thank you so much for all the work that YWCA has traditionally done for racial and social justice.
We are very happy to have you, Jenny. I am very proud. I have seen your work in the last couple of years and your organization is amazing. And you collaborate with a lot of agencies that help immigrants in Bucks County. Jenny, tell us a little bit about our organization and how it has begun. The Doylestown area has your office there right now, right? You have it there?
That's correct, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how we grew so fast. I'm going to share a few slides just to give folks a sense of the range of our work. So I'm clicking on to share. And now to present. And I'm hoping that you can now see the slides that we have. It should come up with an overview of our work. We are Immigrant Rights Action, Grupo de Accion, and located in Doylestown. We have four main focuses. We work to educate people about their rights. We document ICE activity in our immediate community. We provide all kinds of legal support. We are not ourselves lawyers, but we provide referrals to reputable and reliable immigration attorneys. We have an extensive program of accompaniment to immigration court, ICE supervision visits, and criminal court. And we have a legal defense fund that can help immigrants financially in their legal immigration cases. Then finally, we do legislative advocacy. We work at the local, state, and federal levels to rectify the system and ensure more justice and openness for immigrants. Our community, we do work with immigrants and from any background and any status throughout Bucks County. However, the largest community that we serve are the majority of the folks that we serve here in the Doylestown area are Central Americans, some of them long-term undocumented residents of Bucks County, as well as recently arrived asylum seekers. So the majority of our work is done bilingually in English and Spanish. We started in 2017 in March when in direct response to an ICE raid in our community that apprehended 4 young restaurant workers on their way to work and impacted 8 businesses in the community. Since then, we have grown considerably into a group that is known as a resource, a significant resource in the area. We have a volunteer base of about 30 volunteers, and we serve hundreds of immigrants annually. We are partnered with HISPA, which is the largest and oldest legal immigration services provider in the state. We provide regular legal immigration clinics as a part of our work with HISPA. We also provide community navigator training, which is a series of know your rights and train the trainer workshops in order to boost awareness of everybody's rights under the law, regardless of their legal immigration status. And we do have an office, as you mentioned, in Doylestown. We have regular open office hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we're available by appointment for consultations at all other times, including evenings and weekends, in order to accommodate people's work schedules. We provide resources, information, help securing social services, legal referrals, as I mentioned, and also documentation of ICE activity. Most of these resources are available on our website, www.immigrantRightsAction.org. We also put on a biannual roundtable for agencies, programs, and churches and ministries in Bucks County that serve immigrants, regardless of whether that immigrants are their primary focus or just constitute a sizable proportion of the people that those organizations serve. We now have 40 agencies, programs, and churches in that network. And we are active at the state level, including being very, very involved in the statewide campaign to join our neighbors, Maryland, New Jersey, and New York, in providing driver's licenses to all residents of Pennsylvania, regardless of their immigration status.
Well, Jenny, it's interesting that you mentioned the group that works together and that you are with other states in the area. Can you tell us about how throughout the history of the United States, there has been racial injustice and controversy in the matter of immigration? Can you tell us a little bit about that history?
I'd be happy to. This is a big part of the education work that I do. One of the things, of course, that we're organizing against is the reliance on immigration detention and deportation as a measure of enforcement for immigration. One of the first things that I learned when I began studying this was that it has been built into our system from the first, as have been, unfortunately, racial discrimination and white supremacy baked into the system. Just a few aspects of that include, this is a graphic from freedomforimmigrants.org that talks about that history, and I'm not going to go into huge details. I just always like to remind people that Ellis Island, which for so many white European immigrants constitutes a vision of this nation as a country of immigrants, was actually opened as the first dedicated immigration detention facility in the world. And immigrants were in fact detained there, both if they were denied entrance into the country or if they were in the process of being deported. So that's an interesting aspect of how even some of our symbols of immigration have racial injustice built in. I also always want to remind folks that we have been fighting for some time an incredible intensification of our legal barriers to immigration that started in 1996 when President Clinton signed into a number of laws into effect that made it easier to deport people and harder to obtain legal status. And in fact, the slogan Fix 96 has been part of the immigrant rights movement for the last 20 years. A lot of our allies and volunteers were activated by the election of the Trump administration and a lot of anti-immigrant rhetoric. One of the things that I also find myself constantly needing to educate people about is that, shockingly, with all that we hear now about apprehensions, detentions, and deportation, in fact, since up through the end of financial year 2019, as you can see on this slide, our interior deportations have actually been at a much lower rate than they were between 2008 and 2012, and up through even equaling 2014 levels. So we are definitely, although certainly the present administration has made unprecedented attacks on both legal and legal immigration and, sort of very publicly at the border, working to stop the inflow of Central American refugees. I'm always educating and reminding people that these issues did not begin in 2017, and we will need to continue to organize to fight for the rights of immigrants, regardless of who wins the election that is coming up in November of this year.
Yeah, it comes to show that it doesn't matter what party is in the White House. We will have to deal with immigration issues. We had done that for many, many years. So I have a question about basically what is happening right now with the coronavirus pandemic. Could you explain to us how immigrant families have been affected in this country through this process where we are trying to adapt to a new lifestyle with coronavirus, and how it has affected their rights in receiving services?
So absolutely, this community has been at the forefront of those affected by the coronavirus, in part because, of course, we are seeing that the coronavirus disproportionately affects the poor, the essential workers, those folks who are, at jobs that cannot be done by teleworking. Many of our community right here in Doylestown work in the restaurant industry and were instantly impacted by closure. And of course, the majority of them do not qualify for any kind of state or federal support, whether unemployment or the cash support that was provided through the CARES Act. We did respond to that by creating a set of resources for the time of COVID-19, which are available on our website, everything from local food pantries to tenants' rights. And I'm also happy to report is that although it is not normally we were not a social services or direct support provider, we have been able through affiliations with our state, the Pennsylvania Immigrant Relief Fund, and most recently through the National Hispanics in Philanthropy Fund, we've been granted over $30,000, which we've been able to distribute, and in grants for immediate cash support for folks who are desperate for the next meal on the table, or to prevent or to pay 1 more month worth of rent.
That's very good that we are able to see an organization like yours working together in helping with other agencies and collaborating at this time. How can the immigrant community receive information and help in your organization? I know you mentioned the website. You're working together with other collaborative agencies, including ours, that we're going to make sure that we provide information to our clients about your services. How can the immigrant community receive information and help in your organization?
I would recommend that we go to the website, and that I will share at the end of this presentation that will rest on the screen. It is www.immigrantRightsAction.org. There is an email contact form on that website that both immigrants and allies can use to get in touch with us, and they can also subscribe to our newsletter, which comes out once or twice a month and just keeps people updated on our activities. And you want me to I will slide right into talking to how allies also can support this work. As I mentioned, we do have, sort of an email newsletter. If we are particularly reaching out right now to faith communities as a part of, as we tee up for the introduction of driver's license legislation this September in the state legislature. And I am inviting folks who are active in their faith communities to provide, to get in touch and provide a representative to an organizing call that will help mobilize congregations in support of the right for the human right to mobility, which would disrupt a major trigger for immigration enforcement, and also be materially helpful to families who currently have no legal way of being able to drive around in areas of Bucks County that have very limited public transportation. We, in response to that, our volunteers have put probably over 3,000 miles on their cars in the last years. This is a sample page from our volunteer sign-up sheet from last October. You can see that we have a very active, varied set of services. And so for individuals who live in the Central Bucks area and for whom it would be convenient, we encourage you to get involved as what we call an on-the-ground volunteer, working directly with the immigrant community. This is not necessary to speak Spanish to do this. Actually, many of our folks just get by with Google Translate on their phones. Of course, we do have a legal defense fund, which is entirely crowdsourced. Our goal for this year, for 2020, is $15,000. We have distributed to date over $30,000 close to $40,000 in 80 separate legal immigration cases. And that's all done with the support of allies in the community who want to help see residents of Bucks County be able to access high quality legal representation. We do hold public meetings. In the past, they were physical, in-person, bilingual meetings here in Doylestown. Now, of course, they are held virtually on Zoom, which opens up attendant possibilities for people throughout the county if you're interested in getting involved. And here is our website and this phone number, which is our group phone number and rings directly to my cell phone.
Well, I just have to say that in one of the times when I was working as a family center coordinator for 12 years with the YWCA, there were times when I would have liked to have this information, where to send my clients for direct help in case of immigration issues. And so we are very grateful at the YWCA to have your organization working together to help immigrants and people that have questions in regards to their situation. And it's not something that we have just started recently. The YWCA has worked with immigrants for many, many years. And when you mentioned the Ellis Island history, yes, we actually have been there at the Ellis Island area. We have participated in helping people, and I remember seeing in history there pictures in Ellis Island of the YWCA providing soup and meals and sheets and blankets for people, families, women and children that were going through that process of immigration and couldn't come to the United States, a lot of them. So we are very thankful to have you and your organization, Jenny, working with us and collaborating with other agencies in this situation. So right now, I'm going to see if there's any questions that people would like to ask, or any comments that you would like to interact with. Right now, it's open for questions, and we are seeing that right now I don't have any questions yet coming up, but you have a lot of information in terms of people that would like to volunteer and help. You have 30 volunteers. Can you tell us, you said you had information there on your slide about how people can donate and the donation page where people can actually provide. Do you get any other funding besides the donations of people in this area?
So yes, we do. We have our legal defense fund is entirely crowdsourced, so that we do depend on typically very small, it could be small or large donations from the community, from folks who are concerned for the rights of immigrants and would like to know that they are helping folks right here in Bucks County. We also have been so gratified to have had the results of a support we joined PIC, which is the Pennsylvania Immigration and Citizenship Coalition, a statewide coalition of community organizations like our own, when we first started. And through PIC, we were able to access funding from a statewide fund called PA is Ready, that is actually the grants are made by groups that also receive the funding. So it's a very democratic funding organization. And with help from PA is Ready is how we began our affiliation with Highest PA, which will continue into 2021. We have also received funding from Mary's Pence, an organization in Minnesota that funds primarily women-led small grassroots organizations, because our board is all women, our volunteers are primarily women, and we also find that although the majority of the individuals impacted directly by detention and deportation are men, it is the women, the family members, who are reaching out for contact for us, to us, looking for support when a loved one has been detained. We have also, as I mentioned, we received an emergency, like a COVID-19 specific grant from Hispanics in Philanthropy. We also had state funding from the Pennsylvania Immigrant Relief Fund, which was also put together by the PA is Ready folks. And also we received funding from COVID-19 relief, which is through the Philadelphia Foundation. So we have had and I forgot, there's a group called Resist Foundation, or the Resist, that also has provided us with funding. These, the funding that we get that is not specific to legal defense, much of it is used to pay our first part-time employee. We do have a goal, our long-term goal, because we want to stay in Bucks County and continue serving immigrants. I am a full-time volunteer, but it is our goal to fund and hire an executive director in my place who will be paid for that work. And so we are already building towards that with a person identified for that position, who I'm proud to say also is herself an immigrant. She came from El Salvador as an 8-year-old with her mother, fleeing the civil war there, and actually grew up in this country undocumented. She was able to regularize her status at the age of 18, but she did not, unbeknownst to her, as sometimes happens to people, she did not have lawful immigration status until she became an adult. It is very important to me as a white native-born American that I feel that an organization that is serving immigrants ought to be led by an immigrant, and so that is part of our long-term goal as well.
That is an amazing goal, and it is great. I feel that with immigration rights, your organization, having someone who was an immigrant that went through the process, can understand the needs of the people that you're serving. So we have a question, and it says, how can we combat the idea that all immigrants are involved in criminal behavior?
That is actually a very, very good and central question to our work, because we do fight the criminalization of immigration and immigrants. It allows me to bring up the fact that it's important for us to recognize that the issue of immigration is intersectional with, and definitely intertwined with mass incarceration in our country. The reason that we have so many people, more people than any other country in the world, in jail, a higher percentage of our population imprisoned, is precisely because of the criminalization of behavior, rather than seeking solutions to the social and systemic problems that underlie that. So countering the narrative of immigrants as criminals also helps lift up the issues that we've been seeing so much at the forefront of people's minds in the context of police brutality, the calls to defund the police, and the long-term fight against mass incarceration. In specific, one of the things that we sometimes discuss in our group that we've worked at in terms is thinking about the language that we use around immigrants. So that helping to, rather than, sort of there's a very common language. A lot of people know that it's not
considered courteous to talk about somebody as an illegal immigrant. What we talk about is somebody who is undocumented or even an aspiring American. That we recognize that our immigration, the issue is not that there are that there's a line and a proper process that people can follow for immigration, that the folks that we are dealing with have somehow jumped ahead of others. The problem is that within our current system, because of the laws in place since 1996 and because of many other aspects of our immigration system, literally provide no path in for folks other than applying for asylum, and which has given rise to this very well publicized crackdown on that particular mechanism for seeking status. So what we say is, we acknowledge the fact that that system is not appropriate for the vast majority of our Central American refugees, although many of them are in fact fleeing political or social or racial or religious persecution. But we need to revise the system in order to provide, it will decriminalize the, this message if we, this narrative can be undermined by providing an accessible and affordable path for legalization, which this is what we are dealing with: families, with community members, parents in the schools, workers in our local businesses. And while there are maybe individuals who are impacted by the criminal justice system, that speaks more to the pervasiveness of the criminal justice system in our lives, and the fact that that's the only way that we can see to resolve social problems is frequently through the criminal courts. I hope that was helpful.
I think it was, yes. I hope that it helped the participants understand a little better about that. I see no other questions, but if you could elaborate a little bit more about other agencies that are, for example, Montgomery County. Off the air, we were talking and I was asking questions about, do you know of other agencies like yours that are working for the immigrant rights in, for example, Montgomery County, Philadelphia, other organizations that people can reach in the Pennsylvania area? Because we're going to be sharing this video once we're done through our socials and through our website. And our YWCA USA national organization is going to be also sharing this. And we would like people to know in our area who can help them.
So that is one of the great, as I said, because we took a membership, became an organizational member of PIC early on. We are well connected with many immigrant organizations through, actually, not just in our area, but throughout the state, which has just been a tremendous blessing to get to know and work with and collaborate with individuals, and to seek ways that what can we accomplish together that we cannot do separately as small local organizations. I would call Bucks and Montgomery County particularly underserved. One of the things that when our little group was first coming together as just an informal volunteer network collective, we would have referred the folks in our community to an immigrant rights organization in our area had one existed, but we found that there was none. And so we felt that was our motivation to grow and begin to fill that niche. I'm not aware of any umbrella type immigrant rights organizations in Montgomery County, but I frequent when I get calls, and again, we do respond. If I get a call from somebody who is on, they don't even have to be bordering Bucks County, from wherever they call, whether it be New Jersey, Green Lane, which is out in the middle of the other end of Montgomery County, I will seek to find, to match that person up with the services that they need and with an organization that can advocate for them or help them navigate the challenge that they're facing. And we are connected with groups in New Jersey. In Montgomery County, I almost always wind up sending our Spanish speakers to Aclamo, which is an incredible organization located in Norristown that runs, has well-established social services, provides legal immigration services, childcare, has a food pantry, is a community center. that is run by and for the Spanish-speaking community in Norristown. So there are resource groups, and there's a very active Korean American group in Montgomery County. There are other organizations of that sort, sort of the grassroots local organizations to meet individual needs. But as I said, if I get a call from New Jersey, then I'll help the person find the resources that they're seeking.
Good. So I see a comment here for you, and it's also kind of a question. It says, your wonderful work and direct help for immigrants is so valuable. And since you mentioned a collaboration with churches around the area, please let us know more about this collaboration and how the interfaith community can help with their denomination to get more direct involvement with your organization, because religious groups are helping immigrants as well. So how can they be directly involved?
So this is a wonderful opportunity. I'm going to pop the slide back up about the Zoom call that I'm having, just in case there are folks who, oops, wait, I have to press share. There we go. I'll get down on this. I just want to pop back up this slide. So I will talk over it. I'm in agreement that faith communities have been on the forefront of the battle for immigrant justice, and not just recently, but through, historically, very much prevalent in the sanctuary movement of the 1980s, when churches actually bonded together to assist Central Americans from El Salvador and Nicaragua who were coming into the country seeking refuge. And we also, one of the groups, when we were talking about groups available in Philadelphia, there is the New Sanctuary Movement, which is actively an interfaith coalition of congregations that provides accompaniments and support for immigrants, and has been very, very active and central and an inspiration for our own work. Here in Bucks County and in the surrounding areas, whether it be Montgomery borders with Montgomery, or down in Philadelphia, because of course Bucks is a big county, we are launching a week of action in September that's connected specifically with the introduction of legislation to win the human right of mobility for all residents of Pennsylvania, regardless of their immigration status. And as I mentioned, this is a concrete material benefit that immigrants are very, very passionate about. Driving Pennsylvania Forward, which is the coalition that we belong to, is an immigrant-led organization. And that is, so individuals, if they get in touch with me, can also participate in or directly with Driving Pennsylvania Forward on behalf of their congregations. But I would say the place to start would be to try to join us on this Zoom call on Tuesday, September 1st at 2 o'clock. Of course, with the wonders of Zoom, since this cannot be a physical meeting, we will record it and make that available to individuals who are interested in following up. So again, if people want to get in touch with me through the website, www.immigrantrightsaction.org, there's a web contact form there, and it comes right to my email. So you'll be getting right to me, and you can just let me know that you'd like to represent your congregation in participating. There will be, I think we have 6 Hispanic churches and ministries from the Bucks and Montgomery County communities so far. And there's, I have personally spoken at probably a dozen different faith congregations, the UCC, the Levittown, the Bucksmont Unitarian Universalists, Abington Quarter Friends, that's the Quakers, Bucks Quarter, so collection communities of Quaker meetings. So I definitely have had great success in reaching out to religious and faith congregations. Shir Ami is another one, the synagogue in Newtown. So we have a basis that we're working on, but we would welcome other engagement. So if you individuals watching this who are part of a faith community, please do reach out to find out how you can work together, specifically with Hispanic ministries and churches in our area, to engage and mobilize voters around persuading our legislators to take a strong, brave stance for driver's licenses for all. I'm going to let you know, it's not going to be easy to win this. And so we know that it's not going to be a matter of, put this legislation in and vote and yay, everything is better. It's going to be a battle. And in order to do that, we need to seek power together.
Yes. So we have a great question from one of our staff. Jessica, she asks, are there any resources that you're aware of that focuses specifically on employment for aspiring Americans?
As far as employment opportunities, one of the places that we've collaborated with throughout our history and was integral in our founding was Welcoming the Stranger, which is an ESL program that works with immigrants throughout Bucks County and a little bit in Montgomery and North Philadelphia as well. A wonderful organization that gives offers free ESL classes and also citizenship and naturalization. But I know that in addition to that, they maintain, a sort of they're a kind of an agency that will help folks who are their students when they're seeking employment. So that's one resource that I would often send people to, just because they have a history of working very closely with individuals to help find that kind of work. We have not ourselves developed that kind of a resource. But I do, the only thing that I would say, the resource that I frequently, unfortunately, find myself recommending to people is an organization in Philadelphia called Justice at Work, which works with people who've been exploited by their employers. So that if they have, especially people who do not have immigration status, are extremely vulnerable to exploitation because they're seen as vulnerable. And they are vulnerable. They're vulnerable to threats of, I'm going to report you to ICE if you don't accept this. They're vulnerable to abuse and exploitation in the workplace. And I am happy to say that the individuals at Justice for Work have a legal staff and expertise specifically in issues of wage theft, sort of employer times when employers have withheld wages and so forth. And so we are able to refer people who are struggling, who have secured employment but are not being justly treated, with being able to have a resource to defend their rights in that case.
Thank you for answering that question. So I have a question that comes from the participants. What are the challenges in application, legally and financially, for citizenship? Are those challenges a significant bar for those who wish to apply?
That's a wonderful question, and it involves I'm going to step a little bit backwards, because applying for citizenship or naturalization is actually the end point of a process that has to start several steps before. Because a person cannot apply to become a U.S. citizenship without having already received the status of legal permanent resident. Many of us also are very familiar with this status being known as a green card. Because once upon a time, it was a literal piece of paper, cardboard that was green. It is not anymore, but it remains a form of, and what legal residence means is that your presence here is lawful and you are absolutely identified by the U.S. government as having certain limited rights, but not including the right to apply for citizenship after a certain amount of time has passed. So that applying for citizenship is indeed, all immigration is effectively a bureaucratic process, right? There's huge amounts of forms to fill out. They're very long and very boring, and the stakes are very high if you make a mistake. And so most people will hire an attorney in order to make sure that they don't make any errors in that, or if their case is in any way complicated. So there are barriers to access because of cost. And those costs also are built in. There are fees which have just become higher and higher and higher over the years. And in fact, the Trump administration has just announced another set of fee increases that has brought that up to almost $800. So that's like a huge thing to ask people to spend, especially at a time now. So it's very prohibitive for low-income residents, legal permanent residents, to apply for naturalization. How do you get legal permanent residence? That's the place where our immigration laws create such a stumbling block. Under our current system, it is possible to apply for legal permanent residency as, for instance, somebody who is married to a U.S. citizen can petition for residency if they are out of the country. But a person who has lived here for a period of time and their status, whether they entered the country, even if they entered the country originally legally and their status has lapsed, that is very difficult to get the legal permanent residence, to attain the green card. So it's not just a matter of, if you have a U.S. citizen born spouse, then that is not so simple for somebody who does not already have legal status, lawful immigration status. Somebody who did enter into the country without inspection, meaning they didn't come in on a visa, is effectively barred. So that means that the path towards regularizing status is simply not acceptable or not accessible for close to half of the current 11 million undocumented that they estimate are here in this country. And I do want to add that one of the reasons that we went so quickly into providing legal immigration referrals is that we quickly discovered that there's an immense amount of predation on the immigrant community. These folks, many of them would do anything and pay anything in order to be able to apply for legal status. And unfortunately, while an honest immigration attorney would say, I can't accept your money, there's nothing I can do legally to regularize your status. Unfortunately, there are unethical attorneys who will promise their folks, oh, sure, no problem, I can get you a green card, and that will be $12,000. And then we just have heard story after story about people paying tremendous amounts of money to attorneys in the hopes that they can regularize their status, but to no avail, and sometimes in a way that actively put them in danger of detention or deportation. So that is one of the reasons why we have why we offer our free consultation clinics and the opportunity to be referred to reputable private immigration attorneys, because while there are low bono and pro bono immigration legal services, they're almost entirely overwhelmed. It's very difficult to get that case, and that is one of the reasons why we provide financial assistance. But unfortunately, the answer to that question is yes, the barriers are enormous. They start long before citizenship. And our current immigration system just does not meet the needs of many of our mixed status families, people who have been here in the United States for sometimes decades, who literally have no path. They would willingly participate in that process, but we have to change the laws before we can meet the needs of those families.
Thank you for answering that. We have 15 minutes left of this presentation, but before we continue, I wanted to ask you, and it has to do with that in relation to right now, the COVID-19 pandemic, and that some resources or some of these legal proceedings might stop for a while or might continue, but in a slower motion. Have you detected or seen families or immigrant families that have been affected in their legal status because of this late proceedings, things that are going more slow because of the pandemic.
Oh boy, have we seen that. So let me start by winding back. So last summer, my organization helped 20 families, recently arrived asylum seeking families, enroll their children in 2 local school districts, Central Bucks and Penridge. These stories, I want to emphasize, first of all, were beautiful stories of family reunification. These were primarily, most of these folks came to us because we had worked with somebody previously, and then we would get a call saying, my wife and child has come from Honduras. My sister is here from Guatemala. My niece has joined me from El Salvador. So these were beautiful stories about people who have come to make a new life in Doylestown and rejoining family here in the Doylestown area. And we helped them secure their proof of residence that they had to show in order to get into the school district, make sure that the children's immunizations were up to date, facilitating that process to make sure that we got those families in. So those families that entered last summer, most of those folks had court dates that fell between March and now of this year for their first immigration court proceeding. Asylum, again, this is a legal status that they are pursuing, and it's a slow legal process. The initial court date is just the beginning of a process that they would usually go to that court date, then receive a court date for their final adjudication that at this point, even before COVID, was out to like 2022 or 23. So there's a very lengthy period of time to wait, during which time, once they have put their application in for asylum, have a formal application for asylum, 6 months after that, they can qualify for a work permit. Work permit allows people to it comes with a temporary social that allows people to open bank accounts, get a driver's license. It makes life much, it's easier to rent. You can get your own name on a lease. It makes life much simpler. But each one of those folks who came in last summer had to hire an attorney, transmit their formal application for asylum before their 1-year anniversary of entering the country, but now they have their court date has been put off. And most of those have been rescheduled for February or January, February 2021. And then now we're going to see that process is going to be even more delayed. Meanwhile, the administration has announced that they're no longer going to give people work permits who entered in search of asylum, who, if they cross the border without presenting themselves at an entry point, then they're not going to be able to get a work permit, and that's going to be for 3 or 4 years. So that is an immense change that's going to significantly impact the community and put them, and give them the choice, effectively, of violating the law by driving without a driver's license, or having to be very limited in terms of their ability to work. I should also add that we have seen a huge change. There were huge and COVID-related changes. Some of them were COVID-related, and some were related to the Wait in Mexico or MPP policies. This year, and somebody who arrived at the border in the exact same situation as the folks that we were greeting here last year, this year, instead of being permitted into the country to go join family members, they were pushed back into Mexico to live in effectively refugee camps and tent camps and in incredibly overcrowded housing to wait for initial court dates that were 3 or 4 months in the future that are held in with these court proceedings held in giant tents. And so that Wait in Mexico protocol means that we did not have anything like 20 families arriving this summer. And we also have, then following that protocol, they also closed the border and announced that at this point they aren't even the ICE, or the Border Patrol, when Border Patrol meets somebody at the frontier, they don't even put them into asylum proceedings, they just remove them back out of the country. So lots of changes, some of them COVID related, some of them related to the Trump administration's attack on asylum, but all of them really, sort of just working together to make an already difficult and dysfunctional system even more broken. Like I don't know how the asylum courts are going to dig their way out of this backlog. I can't imagine how. And the immigration judges themselves there is an immigration judges union has been carrying on a fight to try to say, we can't do this work.
Sounds to me that we need more lawyers and more judges that could take care of our immigrants and this situation. Not to leave everything on a sour note, before we end, I don't see no more questions and comments from our participants. So tell me.
Carolyn, I'm so sorry. I do see one that popped up in the chat.
Okay, so let's see. What is the risk for someone who may want to hire someone without a work permit or proper documentation? And I'm glad you saw it. I didn't see that on the side. Thank you.
It came across my screen. So this is a very interesting issue because, and I'm very, very glad that Catherine brought this up, because the reality is that immigrants form a tremendous part of our labor force. And many of them are, obviously in any labor relationship, we have both the workers and the employers. So, and an immigrants who, because they are not documented, cannot safely organize for better working conditions or higher wages. So employers are kind of a fan of having a labor force that is not able to organize. There's it's not a coincidence that some of the first hardening of the Mexican-American border, that U.S. border that we saw in the 1960s came at the exact same time that farm workers in California were beginning to successfully organize under Cesar Chavez. What this means, however, is that our system has systematically punished the workers, and almost never are there consequences for the employers. So the real answer, while I could not, of what is the risk for someone who may want to hire someone without a work permit or proper documentation, like the law is that that you're not supposed to pay people under the table, right? What's the reality, folks? There are so many businesses where that's happening, and every one of those workers is subject to exploitation and to diminished wages. And until we have a system, an economically just system that meets the needs of workers and of small employers who would love to be able to legally hire an immigrant labor force, but can't, we're going to wind up with this, this tension. But I place the tension is because on the whole, it's an advantage to corporate capitalism to have a vulnerable and impoverished and powerless workforce. What is the real risk? The risk is you are breaking the law to hire somebody, to pay somebody under the table. But we all know that happens at all levels of, of society. So that's my answer.
Thank you for answering that question. And again, we just want to remind people, our folks that are watching, to use the Q&A section instead of the comments. That way we don't lose in the future your questions. So to end on a very not too sour note, do you have, on your experience since you started with the organization, any positive story to share with us before we end the presentation today?
Oh my goodness. Everything about the emergence of this organization has actually been, I'm a Quaker, I'm a friend, and our expression is way opens when you're on the right path. And there are so many times when, as a group, doors have flown open, connections have been made, magical networking has come together to solve an issue an issue for whether it be for an individual or a need that our group had. And so there are just many, many stories like that. But also I want to share some of the stories of, for instance, we are just coming now because immigration proceedings are so slow. We're actually just starting to see the outcomes of some cases that we entered into. So I will share that when case that somebody contacted us in early 2017, right as we had just started. He was a Plumsteadville resident. He had been apprehended by ICE in January at his brother, like he was at his workplace, and they came looking for his brother, not for him. But since they talked to him, they were like, all right, well, looks like he couldn't show a Pennsylvania ID. So therefore, he was under suspicion of being not having lawful immigration status. He was detained. He was spent several months in jail at York County Prison, which is one of the places where ICE has a contract to detain individuals here in Pennsylvania. And his family paid bond and hired an attorney for him. So he called us in, I want to say, April or May of 2017 saying, I'm kind of worried about my lawyer. I don't feel like anything's happening. And I was wondering if you could let me know if they're trustworthy. And I looked them up and I was like, these folks have complaints against them. They've been, disciplined by the Pennsylvania bar. I think you might be better off in the hands of another attorney. So we took him, we assisted him in transferring his case into the hands of an attorney for one of the dozen or so attorney firms that we now work with, but one of the original ones that we've been working with. And his final individual hearing was last winter. And he went to court to argue that he could not be returned to Guatemala. His plea was like, I am at risk of torture if I return there. And his judge did grant him what is called withholding of removal. Now, this is not the same as asylum. I am going to say it's not an entirely happy story, because with asylum, somebody does have a path to a green card. And remember, what a green card can give you, ultimately a path to citizenship. Withholding of removal is not an immigration status. It just gives somebody a permanent work permit. So he has a work permit, he can get a driver's license, he can participate in society. And of course, the wonderful news is he was not going to be separated from his wife and his daughters who are the daughters who are U.S. citizens, and returned to his country. So it's a happy ending for his individual story, but it also points out for me how far we need to come, because we still need to go, because there is no option for him to ever fully regularize his status. And so that's as much as I can give you, because it was, we celebrated and are so happy for that family, but we still see the need for systemic change in order to make our country a welcoming place for the immigrants who've come here to make a new life.
Well, with that, I have to say thank you so much, Jenny Isaacs, from Immigrant Rights Action Group de Accion, Grupo de Accion de Doylestown, for such a good informational and grateful presentation, and to participants for being here with us on this special day of our 100 years of Women's Equity Day, Equality Day. So I just want to say thank you, Jenny Isaacs, thank you participants, and thank you YWCA. Visit our website, ywcabucks.org, and also follow us on our social media. Take care now.